Hello, my name is Jordan, and I'm the second affirmative for FCC regulations and why they should be rescinded. To briefly restate our inherency claim, which is existing FCC regulations harm our constitutional right to freedom of speech. As Savannah stated, our rights that are granted to us in the First Amendment actually are being abridged by the government itself and by the FCC, whose credibility is questionable, and I will go further into that in just a moment. To restate our significance claim, FCC regulations constrain free expression, and this is of individuals and of artists. Within our significance claim, I have three sub-issues that I would like to address today. Number one being indecency versus decency. Number two, public interest. And number three, the human potential. In regards to indecency and how the FCC determines it, the FCC has a two-pronged test that include these two main points. One, it judges the nature of content based on the explicit or graphic nature of the description or depiction of sexual and extracurricular functions. Included in that is the amount of time that this content is aired and the intention of the content, whether it is for sexual assignment or shock value. And the second prong of this test is the consideration of community standards, which are the standards of the average viewer. However, despite this test, the FCC is inconsistent and hypocritical in their rulings, as we have previously mentioned. For example, SDC Katz goes over in her article, The Lewd, Crude, or Partially Nude Indecency Regulation, Fleeting Expletives, and the High Price We Pay for Not So Free Speech. There was an incident that occurred between the FCC and ABC over ABC's airing of the well-known critically acclaimed film Saving Private Ryan and the broadcasting of Martin Scorsese's documentary The Blues, Godfathers, and Sons. The Commission fined the network for airing the documentary due to its expletives, but did not fine ABC for airing Saving Private Ryan that contained similar expletives as a documentary. The reasoning behind this for the FCC was that the deletion of the words from the film would have altered the nature of the artistic nature of the work, but the documentary's viewpoints would have not been violated or diminished without the expletives. So even though the documentary was considered educational, this coincides with the negatives brought up of viewpoints not being altered or restricted, and it also this is why, because this conflicts with the FCC's authority that does not allow them to, and I quote from the same article, penalize profane language if the use is essential to the nature of an artistic work. Consequently, this example does show that viewpoints, regardless if educational or artistic, are subject to the FCC's own subjective rulings, and in that case, a viewpoint can be restricted or altered according to the FCC, and thus their credibility is questionable. In regards to public interest, according to the Consumer Complaints Chart and Data Overview on the FCC's website, only 12.3% of customer complaints for the FCC are for TV and radio indecency. This, I'm sure, as it sounds to you, it does to me, is an incredibly small percentage of the American population. A part of this low percentage is Jacob Solom, a father of two, who is also senior editor for Reason magazine, as well as an average consumer, as he states in his article. He states that the FCC's weirdly selective censorship is not just unnecessary, but increasingly incomprehensible. And that it is impossible to extract clear guidelines from the FCC's highly subjective judgments. In addition to this, Frank Kovaras, a professor of history and American studies at Amherst College, states that the media follows changing social norms rather than leads them, and that he is very skeptical that if we let the media broadcast certain kinds of images or words, that it's going to significantly corrupt or change the existing morals of society. Moving on to human potential. It is to plainly state, it is clearly being restricted and imposed upon by the FCC. And networks, in their attempts to censor this material, have, and I'm quoting from the same article by Stacey Cox, that the practice of self-censorship by the networks leads to censorship of individual artists and performers' ideas. So the value and the quality and the quantity of the work is being violated here with the FCC regulations. And this human potential, to quote a famous man I'm sure we've all heard of, what's right about America is that although we have a mess of problems, we have a great capacity, intellect, and resources to do something about them. Henry Ford. I'd like to use that as a segue into our solvency claim, which is rescinding the FCC's authority to restore power to the people. I have 2 subpoints within here, and hopefully my second subpoint will address the negatives claim presently. First, that broadcasters should have sole power on what they broadcast in conjunction with the public interest. By allowing the networks to have their own freedom, it would benefit the networks themselves and the public that wants access to this type of material, and it will not cause any great harm to anyone. I quote from Elizabeth Steele's article examining the FCC's indecency regulations in light of today's technology. And that the material that is made available on television coincides with a quote I previously mentioned, is not likely to change in a drastic way, since the networks would lose many viewers if their broadcasts became too indecent for the public as a whole. Speaking of indecency, I would like to move on to what parents deem as indecent and their part in this, which is my second subpoint. Parents, while it may be tempting for parents to advocate for stricter indecency laws, the complete ban, oh no, oh, dang, okay. Well, overall, deregulation and rescinding of the FCC's laws would restore power back to the people.